If you want to make a 3D animation in Blender, this tutorial is for you. Start by adding an object. I will add a cube to the scene. In order to animate the cube, you need to add keyframes. To add keyframes, you can do it simply by pressing I on your keyboard, and it will automatically add a keyframe to the timeline. By default, the keyframe will be on the first frame. It will contain your 3D object's position, rotation, scale, and other parameters, and in order to add more keyframes, make sure to move the timeline to another frame and press I on your keyboard, and it will add another keyframe. To add keyframes automatically, you need to click this option, Auto Keying Mode. When this option is turned on, every time you make a change, like move, rotate, or scale the object, it will automatically assign a keyframe. And here's the keyframe. If your timeline is set to another frame, it will appear after the first frame. This is an animation player. As you can see, you can play the animation by pressing this button or by pressing space on your keyboard. Use these options to move to the previous or next frame, which is useful if you need to define a duration of the animated action. The duration can be modified in this field, which is the last frame of the animation. Now you can play with the rotation, scale, and position, add materials, and experiment with the background color and lighting. You can also modify your model to make it look more interesting. Here's how I designed a simple spaceship. To make the animation look more interesting, make sure to change the position of the camera and adjust the camera angle of the scene. Another cool parameter that you can adjust with the camera is the focal length. So you can make the camera act like a wide lens. Okay, those are some basic tips for making a 3D animation in Blender. Let's learn the shortcuts. I insert keyframes. This shortcut will automatically add your object's position, rotation, and scale, and all other parameters. Left and right arrow keys. Navigate frames. Up and down arrow keys. Jump between keyframes. Shift left, shift right arrow. First and last frame. Alt plus G, clear location. Alt plus R, clear rotation. Alt plus S, clear scale. With the basic skills in animating various objects in Blender, you can also learn how to modify the curves of animation, simply by going to Graph Editor. In the Graph Editor, you can modify the intensity of the animation simply by changing the shape of the curves. There are several different shapes of the curves, but in order to manually change the curves, right-click, handle type, and select Free. You can also hide the unnecessary animation curves by pressing this button, so you can modify only one parameter of the animation and not get confused by other parameters. Adding curves can also help reduce the number of keyframes and make the transitions much smoother than when adding more keyframes. Make sure to try various kinds of curves until you get the more interesting result. Alright, those are some simple steps when animating any 3D object in Blender. You can add more objects to the scene, but if you want to animate something more complex like a character, you need to do this. In my previous video, I was talking about rigging. Because I have already rigged my character in Blender, I will show you some basic steps how to animate it. Make sure that you turn on auto keying, because every time you move to another frame in the timeline, you want to be able to automatically key the character's position and rotation. I would also recommend you to add a reference image. The reason for that is because it is useful for making a walk-around cycle, because defining positions would be difficult without this reference image. You can find a reference image anywhere on the internet or try to imagine walking or running. To make the idle animation, Start from the default pose of the character, use Alt-R, Alt-G to restart the position and rotation, and make some slight movements of the arms and legs. Make sure to add more frames, because this animation will have up to 24 frames that I have defined. And make the last frame identical to the first frame. You can do it by copying the first frame. Use the shortcuts and tips from the previous part of the video, which was about the basics. Now, let's move on to the run animation. Use the poses from the reference image. Make sure to change the rotations and positions of the arms and legs. And if you have facial details, make your character blink at some point. For the next frame, you should use the second reference part, which tells your character to move the legs. The inner leg has to be bent in order to make some transition between two legs. For the rest of the frames, you need to continue bending the legs and straightening at some point. So, here's how it looks like. You will most likely continue to modify the character so that it looks more natural. And for the last part, let's make a jump animation. Make some movements of the legs and move the main bone down. After defining the key poses, simply try to play with the positions and rotations. I have rigged so many characters in Blender, and here is how it looks when I animate them. Animating your characters is very useful because you want to learn how to animate your characters from scratch instead of using third-party tools for rigging and animation. I would recommend you to add a reference image in order to define the key poses easily. After finishing the character animation, the next step will be to add your character into a game engine, simply by exporting the 3D model with animations. And if you want to export your 3D animation into an MP4 file, go to Output Settings and select FFmpeg, and for the encoding, change the default setting to MPG4. And click here, Render Animation. But that's going to take a lot of time and energy on my computer. So, that's pretty much it for this tutorial. If you want more tutorials for both Blender and Unity, consider subscribing and I will make more tutorials in the future. So stay tuned and happy learning!